It's summertime, and that means that there is plenty of time for leisure activities. If you have a student who has visual impairments, or maybe you're getting a student with a visual impairment into your camp, or they're coming home for the summer and you want some activities and you want to know how to make them accessible for the student who has a visual impairment, I've got you covered. That's exactly what we're going into in this video today. Welcome back to the channel. I'm obviously at home because I'm on summer break right now with my children. Hi, I'm Cassie Maloney. I'm the founder of the Society of Exceptional Educators. We provide 21st century teaching techniques to people working with students who have visual impairments, and this summer is going to be one for the books for your students who have visual impairments. I want to make sure that you are well equipped to help them to explore all of the rec leisure activities that summer has to offer. And the way that we're going to do this is a really fun presentation style. Now, I'm actually not the one that's going to be presenting. It is Julia Hutchinson, who is our Clarity coordinator. Now, Clarity is our VIP membership that helps equip all teachers and caregivers with the ability to consistently teach impactful lessons, even on the days that you just can't, when you can't plan, when things are really tough and you need strategies and you need actual support and materials to come right into your back pocket, into your phone or device, wherever you are. And that's exactly what we do in our Clarity membership. So this workshop is taught by Julia. I'll let her introduce herself, and I hope that you can take away some really good skills and strategies for adapting recreation and leisure skills for your students.
Hello, everybody, and happy workshop day. I'm Julia Hutchinson, and I will be presenting today on our July workshop, which is all about making adaptations to rec and leisure activities in order for them to be more accessible for all of our lovely learners. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. So as I said, today is all about making recreation and leisure activities accessible for learners with visual impairment. I'm just going to briefly go over our agenda and then we can jump right into it. So we are going to really be discussing 4 talking points this afternoon. The first is addressing the importance of teaching these skills to our learners. Rec and leisure is hugely important for so many reasons, and I think oftentimes it's overlooked. So I want to go ahead and touch on that before moving into some barriers that our learners might face with regard to participation in rec and leisure activities. I'm sure you can think of some on your own, but I think it's worth noting the main barriers that I feel I've seen in my experience as both a TBI and O&M. I also want us to highlight some general considerations and adaptations for making all rec and leisure hobbies accessible. So really what we're going to do is we're going to start with talking about adaptations that can be applied to every single activity or hobby you could possibly think of. And then we're going to do a deeper dive into some specific rec and leisure activities that you guys, my Clarity members, actually addressed and brought up with me, stating that you would like more information on these. So I sent out a survey in the newsletter a couple of times asking you guys to tell me what activities you would like me to address. And what the feedback that I received was a lot about accessing gym sports, track, and then also how to make playground adaptations and playground activities more accessible for our students. So again, we're going to do an overview of many adaptations that can be used across the board, and then we're going to jump into the specifics for gym sports, track, and playground. So let's go ahead and get started. So here is our why for rec and leisure skill development in our students. I'm sure you could think of tons of reasons why rec and leisure is so important to teach and for our students to utilize in their day-to-day lives. But what I pulled away from this is that rec and leisure is all about pleasure. It's about personal preference. It's about exercising your passions. And I think oftentimes for our students, they're just told what to do so often. And their programming in school is so geared towards academia that we kind of forget to let them have fun and to teach them how to have fun and to teach them how to learn about different hobbies, how to play with peers, all of these things that rec and leisure captures. I think oftentimes it's unfortunately overlooked, or we pass it off to summer camps, or we put more of the burden on parents to teach rec and leisure skills. But it is a part of the ECC area for a reason. It is hugely important that our students are made aware of the activities and leisure opportunities out there for them, so that they can have a better idea of self-awareness and self-identity, to help them make connections with friends and in their community. And then, of course, to increase their well-being, to have a better understanding of who they are, what they enjoy outside of school. Our students aren't just Braille learners and tech kiddos, right? They might love reading, but that doesn't mean that's the only pleasurable thing they need to be aware of or have the opportunity to do for the rest of their lives. If they want to learn how to play football, we're going to support it. If they want to learn how to run track, we're there for them. All of these different things can totally be made accessible. Our students just need a little bit of help. Rec and leisure is hugely important. And the other cool thing is that every other ECC area can be addressed while also working on rec and leisure skill development. Think about it. How can rec and leisure go hand in hand with orientation and mobility? Well, there's a lot of gross motor movement involved with rec and leisure activities. What about independent living skills? Well, as our students reach graduation, they need to have a pastime. They need to have something that they're going to enjoy outside of just school and academics. How does it work with career development? Oh, well, of course, sometimes our interests and our hobbies turn into career fields and career interests for us. Every single area, social skills, I mean, come on, self-awareness and self-determination. Check, check. Being able to invite friends and to feel included and to have those bonds and connections while performing activities that they enjoy, that's huge. Every single area of the ECC can be addressed while also working on recreation and leisure skill development. The other huge one for me is that we want to reduce isolation and increase inclusion for our kiddos. Unfortunately, I'm sure all of you guys can think back to a time where you've seen one of your students sitting away from the group at PE, or sitting by themselves and playing alone at recess. That might just be because they are not aware of how to participate in the activities that all of their sighted peers are participating in. We don't want that. We don't want them to live a life of just me. We want them to have these opportunities to make connections. And what better way to do that than through really fun activities and play-based activities? You know, everybody can play. Everybody can do a rec and leisure activity together. Our students are just going to need a little bit of help having pre-teaching of concepts, developing an understanding of what the activity entails, all of those things. So why teach rec and leisure? For every single reason I just listed, plus hundreds more, I'm sure. But this is just an hour workshop, so we got to keep it minimal. Now let's talk about the barriers our students might face. I'm sure you could think of other ones, but I wanted to highlight these 4 just because I think that they're more likely than not going to be what we hear from both students and parents, as well as what we observe with our students. So one of the main barriers is that maybe our students simply aren't aware of the play options available to them. Maybe Johnny is sitting over on the side at recess because he doesn't know what swinging is, or he doesn't know how to play the game tag, or maybe all of his friends are balancing on a balance beam and he's never had exposure to a balance beam. He doesn't even know what they're doing. So it's that unawareness that we really need to look out for. We really need to teach our students what these rec and leisure activities are, so that they can be made aware of how to play and have fun outside of what they already know, outside of that kind of bubble that they might be currently living in because they're unaware of other options available to them. And that very much so coincides with their lack of incidental learning and maybe not gaining a conceptual understanding of how to engage in those activities. So often sighted children will watch big brother or big sister or family members playing a sport, or they might see mom building a hammock and reading in it. Our students aren't seeing that. They're not getting that incidental learning for these rec and leisure activities. And so they might just, again, it goes back to that unawareness of what's happening. They're lacking the incidental learning. And so they're lacking the preference or the excitement or the engagement in wanting to learn about these activities just because they haven't had exposure to them. The big one that we're going to address today is that many of these activities are not readily accessible for our learners, and they do require specific adaptations and modifications to be made to enable our students to participate. Doesn't mean our students can't. It's just one of those barriers that, if we're thinking about how to make football accessible for our students, well, there's gonna be some adaptations that need to be made so that our students can participate as well, and not just participate, but actually excel in the activity that they're showing interest in. So we need to make them aware. We need to give them the opportunity to learn about these activities. And then we also need to make these activities accessible for them so that they can participate. The very last big one that I saw that also kind of ties in with these other three is that we do need to be aware that our students might lack gross motor development or the foundational concepts needed to participate in these activities. So maybe our student really is interested in basketball, but they've never run more than 5 feet at a time, or they've never learned how to dribble a ball. They don't have that gross motor movement, that muscle memory. So we need to teach them how to utilize their bodies so that they can participate in these activities. All of these barriers can be broken down by the TVI or O&M specialist working with the student so that they can participate fully and enjoy themselves and play and build friendships and make connections while also learning about really fun, neat hobbies that might follow them for the rest of their life. So though they might have barriers, we can absolutely help them to overcome those barriers by making adaptations and being mindful of the students we're working with and their needs. So with that, we're now going to jump right into adaptations that can be made for any rec and leisure activity you could possibly think of. And I mean, I'm really going to challenge you guys to try and think of an activity for your student that you really think they might be interested in, or their friends and family members are interested in, and you want them to be able to play and engage in that activity. The next two slides are all about the adaptations and accommodations that can work for any activity. I mean, I challenged myself. I sat here while I was developing this presentation. I sat there and thought about activities as minimal as reading or sewing or as extensive as archery, football, basketball, whatever it is. And I went through these lists of adaptations and they applied to every single hobby or activity or area of interest I could possibly think of. So these two slides that we're about to address are going to work for any activity. After this, we're going to talk about the specifics for those activities you guys requested I kind of lean more into. It's not to say these aren't going to work for them. These are kind of the foundational adaptations, if you will, that you should consider for any activity that you're going to work with your student on. And then we'll go into the specifics. So some of these kind of speak for themselves. We know that our students often will require preferential seating or positioning. So we want to be mindful of that when they're learning all of these various rec and leisure activities. We want to make sure that the lighting is appropriate for them as well, as much as we can control. If they're outside and they are going to be participating in an activity at a certain time of day, we want to be teaching and having them practice that activity at that same time of day so that they can adapt to the lighting that is provided. And maybe they need sunglasses, maybe they need a hat. So just being mindful of positioning and lighting for any of these activities is a must. For our students with low vision, we want to make sure that we have high contrast for the environment and the equipment being used. So when we think about, I especially think about like ball sports, for example, basketball. Maybe instead of using an orange basketball for our student, instead we provide a different colored basketball that's really high in contrast against the shiny wood, gym floor. So I know they have those red, white, and blue basketballs, or you can find a different colored basketball online for our student, but just making the contrast higher in all areas of their activity so that the really important things stand out. I'm just thinking about basketball here. Maybe the net and the rim needs to be changed to a different color. maybe the border along the gym floor outlining the basketball space needs to be higher in contrast. So we lay some tape down there. Anything that's going to really pop for them is going to be incredibly helpful. We also want to provide opportunities for the student to orient to the environment ahead of time. I can't tell you how many times I've had students be turned off by an activity simply because of sensory overload, especially in a gym or in a brand new environment that they are not familiar with at all. So we definitely, either O&M or TVI, hopefully both, we want to provide opportunities for the student to orient to the environment where they're going to be completing their activity ahead of time. Same can be said for if they are really interested in hiking, or perhaps they're about to go to a summer camp. If we have the opportunity to expose them to the woods or to take them to the camp ahead of time, let's do it. You know, that's one less thing that our students will have to worry about when they're learning about this new activity and they're developing the skills that are necessary to complete the activity. We want them to be oriented to the environment that they're going to be working in. Reducing clutter, of course, that's, you know, for any kiddo, I feel that's beneficial, but it's especially true for our learners. If stuff doesn't need to be there, let's take it away, especially while they're first learning about this activity. Again, thinking about gym sports, you know, oftentimes we'll see hula hoops and bean bags and cones kind of strewn about the gym. If they don't need to be there, if they're not serving a purpose for the activity that our student is about to engage in, let's take that clutter away. That's one less thing for them to worry about. It's one less thing for them to conceptually get a grasp of while they're just learning about the activity. Same can be said for if your student wants to learn how to sew. You know, if there's a whole array of sewing thread, needles, thimbles, whatever else goes on along with sewing, let's reduce it down to only the stuff they're going to be working with at that time so that the clutter doesn't become a distraction or doesn't become overwhelming for them. So limiting the playing space, this is going to work for students who are interested in activities that are really, what's the word I'm trying to think of, that are really spaced out. So if we think about, I'll use basketball because we're actually going to address basketball later. If we think about basketball, initially, perhaps it would be in the best interest of the student to only work at a half court space. So if we're limiting the playing space, the concepts and the understanding of the activity itself isn't being lost, but reducing it down to a smaller space is going to help them feel in more control of what's happening, and they're going to be able to anticipate what's going to happen in that safe space while they learn those foundational concepts or motor skills or whatever it is needed to complete that activity. Limit the space down initially, and then as they gain confidence, as they grow through the activity and the skills being utilized for it, then you can make the space greater so that they feel more, again, more confident about moving about the space. They're more familiar with what's being asked of them. I'm going to skip to this idea of creating a tactile replica of the space being used. This is incredibly helpful for any kind of activity that has a defined space. So baseball, kickball, hockey, soccer, football, basketball, bowling, track, anything where you can kind of encapsulate the whole space and make a replica of it. I highly recommend doing this because, again, we're taking the whole and we're making it smaller, limiting a space, if you will, but teaching them this is the whole area you're going to be utilizing for this activity, but we're just going to look at it kind of a bird's eye view, if you will, get their hands on it so that they can experience the whole space before actually being placed and dropped in it. So if your student is wanting to run track, maybe make a replica of the track with all of the different lanes and what goes in the middle, where the starting and the finish line is going to be. All of these things they can explore on that tactile diagram or replica initially, and then they can then go experience the whole big track as it really is. So that kind of plays in with this idea of limiting the space as well. Kind of same, a little different, but we want to be able to integrate both of those as well into their learning. Secondarily, when appropriate, introduce the activity by using a model, like a miniature model. So in my mind, I was thinking of bowling. right? So bowling is quite large. There's a long, like 30-foot aisle. Excuse me if I'm wrong. I'm not the biggest bowling person, so I'm generalizing, but we want to make sure that they have a conceptual understanding of what's occurring. And so maybe instead of a tactile diagram of bowling, maybe it makes more sense for them to actually just get hands on a little mini bowling set. Or I know like you can find those little miniature air hockey games. Or if a student is really interested in basketball, but they can't lower the net enough for the student to feel and have hands-on experience with, maybe we get them one of those nets that you attach to like a door or something so that they can feel the rim, the net, the backboard, everything that goes along with it before just trying to reach up and shoot for it out of nowhere. So if a miniature replica can be utilized without confusing the student, highly recommend it. Can kind of work with the vocabulary piece that we're going to address later as well. The last thing is definitely if we're thinking about the environment where the students are going to be playing, learning, participating, let's add some textural changes in the surface to identify boundaries. So what might work for our students with low vision is high contrast boundaries. What might be necessary for our students who are blind or functionally blind is going to be a change in texture to identify a boundary, whether that be utilizing rope, maybe some sand tape, maybe mats, whatever it is that's going to help create that space for them to learn in. Let's go ahead and do that as well, for sure. I know this is a lot, but it's just, this is like your checklist, right? Of like, okay, I'm about to adapt a rec and leisure activity for my student. What do I just know I need to do? This is going to be the start of your checklist. This is how I utilize it, at least. Okay, have I considered preferential seating? Check. Have I added textural changes to the area? Check. Have I reduced clutter as much as possible? Check. Have I provided them with a tactile diagram so that they become more aware of the space being utilized? Check. This first list is all kind of about environmental considerations and adaptations that might need to be made. This next slide is more about adaptations and considerations that need to be made for the game, activity, whatever it is itself. So we've addressed the environment. We know generally what might need to be adapted for whatever activity our student wants to engage in. Now we're going to look at the activity itself and some general adaptations that might need to be made for that. So first and foremost, if you can, slow it down, slow the action when our students are first learning about this activity. Really easy way to do that. And I'm especially thinking about ball sports. I know in the survey, a lot of you were pretty concerned about how we can make gym, PE, recess more accessible for our kiddos. If we can find a way to slow the action down when they're first learning, let's do it. So instead of using a ball, maybe we use a balloon. Or instead of using a beanbag, maybe we use a scarf. Anything that's going to slow it down, slow those movements so that they kind of gain a better understanding, pre-teaching all of those concepts. Let's go ahead and do that so that they don't become scared of what's happening. I've had students who absolutely refuse to let anything be thrown at them because they've had a past experience where a ball was thrown at them when they weren't expecting it and it scared them. That's not what we want to happen to poor Johnny if he's learning to play kickball. Instead, let's kick a balloon, or let's kick a milk carton, or let's kick something that's going to slow it down so that he can anticipate and expect what's going to happen without having that fear come into play. In the same breath, using smaller or larger playing objects when appropriate. I think about kind of our smaller activities like sewing. Instead of using a super tiny needle with really little thread, let's get them one of those jumbo needles to start, and a really thick piece of thread, just so when they're working on either the component of the skill of sewing or threading the needle, we can make it larger for them so that it's more accessible and easily done. They can have those initial successes while also still practicing the skills that coincide with the activity. Same for, if we're teaching baseball, maybe instead of using a really tiny baseball to start, we use a larger wiffle ball. We're slowing the action down. We're also increasing the size of the playing object so that our students are still learning those skills, learning those concepts, but on a larger scale so that they're feeling more confident and just so that they're feeling more confident in what they're doing. Of course, for our students who need it, adding sounds to both targets and peers playing. I go back to the idea of poor little Johnny sitting by himself outside at recess while all of his friends are playing tag. Well, you know what? If we just had a friend wear a bracelet with some bells on it so that Johnny can track and listen to wherever the friend is running, maybe Johnny gets to play it or tag with his friends now because he can seek out the target by sound sourcing. Same for if they're playing hockey or basketball or baseball. Let's add sound targets to the end goal. So if it's basketball, let's add a sound source to the net. If it's baseball, let's add some constant sound sources to first base, second, third, and home run. Anything that can be done to attract our students' attention and make it easier for them to target whatever it is they're needing to go to. Easy way to make an adaptation for basically anything. Add a sound to it so that they know where they're headed and they know what they're tracking and they know what they're sourcing. The big one, of course, as we know, is to provide reference materials. If our sighted peers get it, so do our students. If our students are a little worried about forgetting the rules of a game, well, you know what? We can add a reference material that kind of indicates all of the rules step by step so that they can refer back to it when we aren't there working with them. If they're worried about making sure that they have all of the tools and materials that they need to participate in a certain activity, let's give them a list of all of those reference materials. Or of course, let's ask them to create the list of all of the reference materials. It's always just a good thing to have on deck, especially when learning a new activity or skill, but you guys already know that. All right, of course, the big one in our field, the huge one, the reason that I am a TVI and O&M specialist is pre-teaching concepts and skills. We really need to have an understanding of the baseline of what our students are capable of so that we can start there and build on. So if we know that little Taylor really wants to learn how to play basketball, but she's only ever bounced a rubber kickball, we need to get hands on a basketball. We need to practice the idea of dribbling. We need to practice the idea of throwing both laterally and vertically. All of these pre-teaching of concepts and skills, we want to make sure that they have a foundational understanding of what they're going to be asked to do before just throwing everything at them and hoping for the best. Definitely pre-teaching the skills and concepts. And I'm going to skip down. Also pre-teaching the terms and vocabulary that work with these activities. Maybe Taylor has never heard the word dribble and she's in PE and her PE coach is asking everybody to dribble the ball. Well, we need to make sure that that is pre-taught so that she's not confused when she hears dribble. The other students, they've probably seen their peers dribble a ball, have heard the word dribble or pass or shoot or whatever it is. And so that incidental learning comes into play where it's like, oh, I've made the connection. Dribbling is this, passing is this, shooting is that. Our students aren't going to get that. So we need to pre-teach those terms and vocabulary so that they're not lost when it comes time to actually perform the activity. With that, of course, especially for our students either who are blind or have multiple impairments, we really want to help with physical modeling. Again, do not assume, especially for these kind of sports-based activities, please don't assume that your students have the gross motor skills necessary to perform those. I think that oftentimes we associate age with ability with regard to gross motor movements. And if our students have never had the exposure or have never been asked to use their bodies in that way, there's a chance that they don't have that skill fully developed. And so if physical modeling is necessary, of course, with their permission and with their level of comfort, provide some physical modeling so that they get more comfortable with the gross motor or the, fine motor movements that they're being tasked with. For chess, it's a lot of pinching and pushing and all of this stuff. Well, maybe they've only ever pinched in one regard, and so they don't know how to do it in another. Just don't assume. Always make sure that our students are feeling comfortable and willing and ready to tell you what they do and don't know. And definitely we can't assume that they do know it because they've done it in some other arena or area of their life. Of course, goes without saying, using descriptive verbal directions and auditory cues. Oftentimes when our students are learning a new activity, especially with regard to rec and leisure activities, there's a fair chance that they're going to need some sort of physical and or verbal support and direction with this. So we just want to make sure that we have either ourselves, an assistant, a peer, whomever it might be, helping to guide them through the activity so that they can focus on the play and the learning, and we can be there to support them with the description of what's going on around them or of what's being asked of them specifically. The very last adaptation that we want to consider for every single rec and leisure activity we can possibly think of for our kiddos is this idea of consulting with other team members. This is especially true for our students who maybe have some orthopedic impairment or who have some developmental delay in their gross and fine motor skills. We want to make sure to keep PTs and OTs in the loop. We want to make sure to keep PE teachers in the loop, any aids that they might be using. We want to make sure that instruction is provided similarly across the board, and that we're not tasking the students with doing too much so that they lose interest in the activity right out the gate. You know, if our students have these gross motor development delays or issues, let's start where they're at and let's utilize the physical therapists and the occupational therapists to help us with additional adaptations. It doesn't all have to be put on us. We definitely want to be consulting with team members to make sure that everybody is addressing the needs of our students so that they can succeed in all of these really fun activities we're going to be introducing to them. So I know that was a lot of information. As I said, pause, rewind, do whatever you need to do, but consider these past two slides your checklist. When you're considering teaching any new hobby, rec and leisure activity, whatever it is, check these off. Let's make sure that we're addressing each one of these for the activities so that we're setting our student up for success. If you aren't sure about how to utilize one of these adaptations or accommodations, let me know, reach out to me. I'm happy to accept a challenge and see how we can make it any activity more accessible for your students. But I think this is a great foundational checklist to go through for any kind of activity you can think of. Let's make sure these adaptations are at least put in place so that we can have optimal access for the activity itself. So, as I said before, you guys spoke and I listened. So, when I sent out the survey, one of the main areas of activities, rec and leisure activities that were asked of me was gym sports. So I've addressed basketball and kickball. I know kickball can be played outside as well, but oftentimes it's utilized inside as a rainy day activity for our students. So first we're going to learn about basketball, and then later we're going to learn about kickball. But these are the two gym sports that I've addressed because I really truly think they can be so easily accessible for our students with some adaptations made. So again, think about the adaptation checklist that we've just gone over, how you can apply that to basketball. And then we're also going to talk about some specifics with basketball. However, I've been talking a lot. I know it was a lot to take in. So I found this awesome video. I'm sure you guys saw it. It kind of circulated a couple months back about an individual who is visually impaired making a shot for her team during a basketball game. So we're just going to watch this really quick video, see what adaptations they've made, what they're utilizing, strategies implemented to help this individual succeed. And then we can talk about those specific adaptations next. So here we go. And the crowd goes wild. It just brings me so much joy to see our students succeeding and having fun. So some adaptations that I definitely saw were put in place when considering those general adaptations we had talked about before, utilizing a sound source. So making sure that the student was aware of where the target was that she was aiming the ball at. They were using it looked like almost like a broomstick to just whack the back of the of the basketball net so that she knew where to aim. They were utilizing a sound source. I also saw a lot of physical and verbal directions being made by a peer. That was evidenced in when the peer came back and supported her with her stance before shooting. I also saw 2 peers speaking to her about kind of twisting her body a little bit. And then also having that support of, I believe I heard a buzzer as well, which we're going to talk about for basketball specific adaptations. But again, we can check. I'm sure she was taught some gross motor movement. I'm sure there was a lot of pre-teaching of concepts involved before that awesome shot was made. So again, our students can totally do it. We just need to make some adaptations for them. So first and foremost, for basketball specifically, we want our learner to explore every part of that basketball net. We don't want them to think they're just shooting up into air and when they're told they've made a basket, applaud. No. They need to have a fully developed understanding of what it means to make a shot into a basket, what it sounds like, what the rim feels like, how the net works, all of that stuff. So again, we can go about this hopefully 2 ways, having that small miniature version of a basketball net for them to explore with their hands, maybe even having the net lowered, or excuse me, the basketball rim and net lowered so that they can explore it with their hands full on and real size to scale. And then also using their cane to get an understanding of how high up the net is, what it sounds like when you're banging on it, what the rim feels like. Use that cane as a tool, not just for travel, but for exploration as well, reach up there and get a full understanding and feeling of what's going on. We also, again, I've already said that, I'm jumping ahead, providing a smaller version of the rim net and backboard for exploration so that they know what they're shooting at and what it sounds like and everything else. Providing that smaller piece is going to be hugely helpful for learning basketball and all the concepts related to it. We want physical guidance and modeling for shooting, dribbling, and passing. So again, these are all new. These could be new terms, new vocabulary that our students might not be aware of. They might know how to bounce a ball, but that's not the same as dribbling and walking with it and running with it while bouncing and dribbling it. Same thing for shooting. Maybe they've thrown a ball before, but there's a certain type of skill that goes into shooting correctly. And then of course, also passing the ball and how we can use sound cues for shooting, passing, all of those different things. So we definitely want that directional cue for shooting. As I said, in the video, they were using a broomstick or some sort of cane, perhaps, to hit the back of the basketball net so that the student could source where to shoot. You could also use a beeper up there. I've seen individuals use doorbells, anything to make sure that that sound is being consistently used so that they know where to shoot the ball. I also, in my research, and I actually hadn't considered this one, but using a sound cue for half court identification, knowing when you're on the offense versus when you're on the defense and when you cross that line. So I've seen another sense of like a bell, a rhythmic tune being played from an iPad. I've seen just a coach or assistant clapping on either side, right at half court, any kind of sound cue that helps them to know, oh, I've got to switch. I've got to switch what I'm doing now. I'm on the offense on this side. I'm on the defense on that side. And it switches every single time I go past that half court sound cue. We could also utilize for our low vision kiddos, high contrast tape, perhaps at half court, whatever it is that's going to indicate the switch. Again, high contrast for the net. Putting a really, really bright red square or something right where they need to shoot, whatever's needed when we go back at that other list of adaptations and then adding these things to it. I also found a lot of resources indicating that we need to start with double-handed dribbling at first so that the student feels comfortable running and walking with the ball with 2 hands on it, and then elevating I'm going to go with the word elevating, sorry guys, up to just one-handed dribbling. And then of course, the last one is passing the ball to sound sources. Thankfully, they're going to be playing with peers. And so peers just need to be made aware that they need to really, plant their feet initially, tell the student exactly where they're at, and then the student can sound source their peers and shoot or pass the ball to them. So those are the additional adaptations for basketball specifically. Again, we're going to run through our list of all those adaptations we initially discovered, and then we're going to apply these specifically to basketball as well. So for those of you who are interested in basketball, I hope this was helpful. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next activity, and that is track. So track is one of those rec and leisure activities that I feel our students have a wonderful opportunity to be completely included in, with the pre-teaching of concepts, with the terminology understanding, with having an assistant, with having verbal directions and guidance. Absolutely, our students can participate in track wholly. So when we're considering our low vision kiddos, if we're wanting to make the track itself a little bit more visible, you can add high contrast to the outermost or innermost lane, and that can be their lane that they're practicing in. It creates a natural shoreline on one side for our students who are blind. On the other side, perhaps we add bright yellow tape to the lane. Perhaps like in this picture here, it's already wonderfully highly contrasted, very dark background, white lettering and white boundaries for each lane. Whatever it may be, we just want to add contrast to those lanes so that they really stand out. Coactive movement for teaching. This is one that I think we often forget because we just kind of assume our students know how to run. But when we're talking about track, we're talking about some pretty serious running. We're talking about learning how to breathe through running. We're talking about how to move our arms through running naturally. So this idea of coactive movement for teaching is awesome, because what you do is, typically our students are initially going to have a guide when learning how to run track. So what the guide will do is actually place themselves in front of the student, have like two poles to hold on one end. The guide will hold them on one end, like behind their backs. I should stand up, like behind their backs like this. And then our students will be behind them holding the poles in front of them. And so the poles, because they're rigid, as our guide runs naturally with their hands moving, the student, while holding onto the poles, is going to also be running like that. It's that coactive movement of these are the motor movements you need to have to be aware of, and you need to utilize while running so that it's easier on you. Helps with the breathing too, breathing in and out as you run, finding that rhythm. Again, I've already addressed this, but use of a guide for physical, so using human guide or a tether, or visual verbal guidance. Our students are going to kind of make us aware of what they prefer while learning how to run track. Initially, maybe they want full physical assistance. Maybe they even want human guide where they're touching their guide, and then it goes to utilizing a tether. So a tether is typically 1 to 2 feet in length. It's going to be knotted on one end for the guide to hold on to between fingers, and then knotted on the other end for the blind athlete to hold on to as well. And we're going to try to keep that smiley face dip so the guide isn't just pulling our student along, right? Instead, you just want them to feel like they have a little bit more safety and a little bit more control over the direction they're traveling. So oftentimes it might start with a full physical guide, human guide, and then move to utilizing a tether. For our students with low vision, perhaps they just feel comfortable wanting somebody close to them, giving them directional cues or visual cues of like when a puddle is about to happen, when there's like if they're running cross country, if there's a root in the road, something like that. Our guide might just be wearing a nice bright green reflective vest and helping our student out in that regard. The other option is a guide wire for independent running at shorter distances. I think a guide wire is especially effective for our students who are first really learning how to run more than just a couple feet in length. So guide wire, what it does, I actually have a picture of it here on the left. A guide wire is going to be a nice long wire. All of the sites I've looked at recommend no more than 100 feet with a starting and stopping position, whether it be poles, cones, anything sturdy enough to hold the wire. And then you use a carabiner and a tether basically to loop through the guide wire so that the student runs along with the wire. The wire is staying really nice and taut, but then the student is holding the tether just like they would with a guide, and they're running along that wire. The carabiner is keeping it nice and loose, so they're not going to have any faults, stopping, getting stuck, anything like that. So I've seen this used at track meets for like the 100-meter run with students. I've also seen it used just to get students familiarized with the concept of running and all of that movement that maybe they're not used to. I've also seen it utilized for both baseball and kickball, where the guide wire is going between each of the bases. So I think a guide wire would be incredibly effective for our students in any kind of these sports where it's shorter amounts of, or shorter distances of running. And then I also included a picture here of what often we consider to be a tether. I know like Olympic and Paralympic level athletes use tethers like this, where they either hold it or they just put it around their wrist with the guide. Again, you just want it to have that nice kind of smiley face level slack so that we're not pulling our student along. Let's see if I can go back. Yep. So the other thing worth considering for a track adaptation is running to a sound source. So having music playing at the finish line so that they know when they're approaching, or when they know when they've made one loop, any kind of sound source to let them know, oh, okay, I'm almost done, or I'm one loop through, and every time I go back to that sound source, I'm doing another loop. That's a really easy one to utilize. The last one, which I thought was really, really cool, was using a talking pedometer or playlist to track time and distance. So I especially think of my students who love music. They're really going to be super engaged if they get to create a playlist for themselves where they know the last song means they're almost done, or the last song means they've been running for 13 minutes, and then they're leveling up each time through their playlist. It's going to be an awesome way for them to, one, become more familiar with time distance awareness, but to also be able to time themselves as they're completing this running that they're doing for track. So those were all of the adaptations that I found for track, of course, in addition to all the adaptations that we have already discussed and highlighted for the general idea of any kind of rec and leisure activity. Oh, and there's our pictures again of the guide wire setup. Actually, APH provides this. And then the tether, I've made them out of shoelaces before. You can truly make them out of basically anything. Okay, so now we're moving on to kickball. Kickball is another one that I think is especially easy for our students to participate in when we just consider environmental adaptations, how to create contrast, how to create surface changes, how to create textures involved for our students. All of those other things we can check off the list, and then we can look more closely at the specific adaptations that need to be made to complete the game of kickball itself. The other option is to actually use beep kickball, which is something that was developed specifically for students who are blind and visually impaired. It's got a little bit different rules. I have some resources at the end of this presentation if you're interested in learning more about beep kickball, beep baseball. There are resources for you to set up your own league or something in your district. I think that's also really fun. So if you're not familiarized with it, we're just going to watch a pretty short video about what beep kickball is all about, where the inspiration came from, and just watching a couple kids truly have a good time.
Only older teens and adults play beep baseball. I wonder what the kids play. And it came to me. Same game, different ball, beep kickball.
My favorite part was when we kicked the ball. And I also want to show you the sound of it, if I can find the button.
I loved seeing the kids, especially Landon and Adolfo, kick the ball the first time and be a little tentative and then get the hang of it after the second and third time and really, really get into it. The other children were wonderful. They had a good time coming out and being the fielders. And they also were so good about being respectful and quiet and cheering when the athletes did well. So this was a fun event.
I've been in adaptive sports all my life, but to see those two kids with visual impairments and their classmates cheering them on, that was priceless. That was amazing. That was just amazing. It really, I think it means so much to the mission of what we're doing. We're really trying to get the word out, make people aware of the capabilities of people with disabilities, and then talk about products like the Beat Kickball. We'd like to continue to develop future products to help the quality of life and physical activity of people with disabilities.
So this is such a great sport for everyone. All the kids who are visually impaired and adults can play. The classmates can play, the neighbors can play, and the family can play. And that's what I love about it.
It just brings me so much joy to watch our students succeeding. When adaptations are put in place, any activity can be made accessible. Kickball, easy peasy. So again, that was specific to Beep Kickball, but conceptually, a lot of these things are the same. We want to make sure that our students have a high contrast ball with a sound source so that they know what they're aiming for, where they're kicking. And then once it's kicked, they can also field it, right? It's not just about kicking the kickball. Our students have to be great defense teammates as well. So having a kickball that's high contrast and or making sound is going to be hugely helpful for kickball. Again, kickball can be played inside or outside, so we want to be mindful of the contrast that's needed depending upon the environment where the students are playing. Placing, for example, if it's outside or even inside, placing large high contrast cones near each base so that the student can visually identify where they're running to as they come up on it. Guiding for running to a base or using that guide wire that I was talking about before. That's a really easy way to cut the nerves and the apprehension about, zigzagging through or whatever it might be. I'm running straight after I kick it to first base and I have either a guide helping me with physical or verbal assistance, or I'm running with my guide wire, getting right to that cone or right to that base that I need to get to. Utilizing sound sources for the base itself is going to be huge. If our students are blind, we want to have a consistent sound at each base so that they know where they're running to. Another adaptation that I was considering for students with multiple impairments as well is instead of having to run directly over a base and maybe being a little fearful about tripping or whatever it might be, maybe we use cones with a beanbag on top of the cone, and all the student has to do to indicate that they've made it to their base is to knock the beanbag over or to, tap their chair with the cone and make the cone move. Whatever is necessary to make sure that our students are included. I say be creative, think through it. You will find a way to indicate the bases and you will find a way to make sure our students get there. No problem. I have all the confidence in the world in all of my members of Clarity. But those are just some thoughts I had when thinking about how to adapt kickball. Let's see. Oh, the kicker or runner can utilize a sound so that the student who's blind can auditorily track. It's been a long day, guys. I apologize. Where they are running. So not only do we want our students participating in the offense, we want them participating in the defense as well. So again, adding a bell bracelet, anything so that the runner is made sound too, because as we know in kickball, runners are targets. So we want to make sure our students are able to track them auditorily and source them out. Same for if we have students with low vision. I didn't indicate this on here, but let's make sure that all of our teams are wearing high contrast and high opposing colors, so there's no confusion about who's on whose team. Also, let's see. Oh, again, we've already talked about this, but changing up the ball choices if necessary. Maybe they need to be larger for our students to see them. Maybe they need to be smaller for our students to see them. Whatever is needed to adapt kickball, I think could be easily achieved and also utilized for baseball as well. With regard to adaptations for students who are blind and visually impaired, kickball and baseball adaptations are going to be awfully similar. The only difference is, of course, the batting component, but you could just use a tee or you could use any other means to get them comfortable with batting as well. But when we talk about the field itself, really apply the kickball concepts to baseball and you're good to go. So the very last one, sorry guys. The very last one that we're going to address today is playground adaptations. We know for a fact our preschool and elementary school age students are going to have exposure to playgrounds. So I really wanted to address this one as well. A lot of the playground adaptations are very much so environmentally based. So if you just kind of want to look over these, we've addressed them a lot in those previous checklist of adaptations, but I did want to add some specifics for the playground as well, such as marking the edge of steps and slides to indicate changes in surfaces. So whether that be tape for high contrast or textured tape for our students who are visually impaired, we want to make sure that the steps and any kind of changes in elevation or surfaces are indicated. Same thing for equipment and hazards that are maybe like poles or anything like that. Let's add some tape to them. Let's add some paint contrast, whatever is needed to make sure that it stands out a little bit more for our students. Equipment, if you can interchange some of the equipment to make it higher in contrast, let's do it. So I'm thinking nets, balls, anything like that. We want those to be bright colored as well. Just to help with our kiddos with low vision so that they really see it and it stands out and it is attractive to them, right? Like, oh, I forgot that we have a slide at the end over here, but now that it's got a bright green cone next to it or whatever it is, I can remember that it's there and I can seek it out a little bit more easily and a little bit more independently as well. We're also going to use some brightly colored cones perhaps to or tape to highlight boundaries on a playground. We don't want our students getting lost or turned around. For our students who are blind, perhaps using tactile or audible markers for perimeters and boundaries, so they know if they come to the beeper at the end, oh, there's no more out here, I can turn around and go back to the play set and focus in that area. I have a boundary for myself now. You can also utilize cones. You can also utilize rope, whatever is most appropriate for the playground that the student is playing on. Using a tactile map or diagram to study the playground layout, I think is hugely impactful for our students. I do that with every single one of my learners. I make sure that they have the tactile diagram provided to them ahead of time and during playground exploration so that they know exactly where everything is in relation to where they are on the playground. So I found that to be very, very, very helpful for my students, not only to pre-teach, but also to teach in the moment, make sure that they have access to it while they're at the playground as well. And make sure that they have like a piece of it where they can actually move themselves on the diagram to the different parts of the playground as it relates to where they are when they're actually on the playground, if that makes sense. Again, of course, hand under hand and physical modeling to support exploration of various play structures. Oftentimes our students are a little bit scared of what to do on a playground, especially if they haven't really had exposure to it. So we really want to work on hand under hand and physical modeling so that they kind of get that gross motor movement of, oh, this is what climbing a ladder is like. And no, I have to push with my feet down first for swinging or for sliding, whatever it is. If we can physically model that for them, they're going to be all the more confident and all the more ready to explore the structure on their own. And then, of course, as I said before, we're definitely going to want to get them oriented to the playground when it's quiet and empty. So there's no auditory or visual distractions, and so that we can lessen sensory overwhelming. I can't think of the word, but yes, we want to make it as focused on exploring the playground and learning about it as possible. So let's reduce distractions elsewhere. So those, I know they were a lot of those were the same as those initial adaptations, but I figured to bring it all the way around full circle, let's go ahead and address those as well, specifically for the playground. The very last thing I included on here, because I know a couple of you guys asked, were just some accessible playground activities that like can be done super easily. Maybe our students are not interested in the playground structure, or maybe like gross motor wise, they're not ready or they are not capable yet of getting on the monkey bars, of sliding, of climbing up the stairs. Well, guess what? That doesn't mean little Taylor or little Johnny needs to be sitting off to the side in the corner, not doing anything. They can participate in all of these accessible playground activities with peers, individually, with their teachers, whatever it is, without even having to touch the play structure. Okay, so we just want to give them opportunities. They can practice their balance on a balance beam. They can do different, ball play activities with balls with bells or beepers, beanbag tosses, dancing, stretching, jumping rope with high contrast ropes or with bells, parachute games, playing catch with Velcro mitts, relay games, tug of war, tumble on a foam pit or mat. All of these different things can be played at the playground without even touching the structure. So again, we need to kind of see our children, or see our students where they're at and go from there with what is going to be accessible, entertaining, fun, and inclusive. If they don't want to touch the play structure yet, it's no big deal. Let's not force it on them. Let's instead get them engaged with their peers doing one of these activities that are all highly accessible and easy for them to participate in. So you guys, I know that was a lot of content. I really hope that you've had fun, that you've applied some of these adaptations, accommodations, and strategies to a specific learning, to a specific rec and leisure learning opportunity for your student. If you have more thoughts, more questions, more feedback, please let me know. If you're like, Julia didn't do it, I still have questions about this activity, like she didn't address kayaking and I don't know how to make it accessible for my student, please, please, please let me know. I find so much joy in the challenge. I want to know how I can help you help your student. If your student is really into kayaking or they really want to pursue archery, we absolutely can get them there together. And I want to help you with that. So please let me know if there's anything I've missed. If there's a specific activity you'd like addressed, you know me, I will make a lesson plan. I will include it in the newsletter. Whatever you guys need from me, I am here to help and support so that we can have student success. Also, of course, anything can be made more accessible for our learners. I wholeheartedly believe that. We need to think outside the box. We need to get creative and we need to utilize resources. Okay, so I'm going to jump to resources next, but it is so, so, so important for our students. This is my final takeaway, I promise. It is so important for our students to enter adult life with an understanding, interest, and access to recreation and leisure activities. Everybody deserves the opportunity to have fun. Everybody deserves to exercise their mind and their body in whatever way they choose. And every single one of our students has the ability and the same opportunity for success with rec and leisure as their sighted peers. We just need to exercise those adaptations and the accessibility options available to them to make sure they have success. And I will have you guys know, I did include some links to awesome resources that I utilized when doing my research for this presentation. However, in the recording, they're not going to be clickable. So what I'll do is I'll be sure to share these resources out either in the newsletter or alongside the workshop so that you guys have access to them too. They addressed so many other rec and leisure activities that I didn't address in this presentation, and they give wonderful tips, tricks, resources out the wazoo. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I've enjoyed creating this presentation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer. I'm looking forward to working with you all again in August. All right, take care.
Wasn't that such a great presentation? I love the way that Julia is able to take really complex information and distill it in ways that we can actually use it. If you liked this episode, please give us a like and a subscribe. If you're interested in joining our Clarity membership, information is down below.